you want to deepen and strengthen your relationship with God? Do you want a better understanding of the Bible? Then join us for the next few minutes as we study God's Word together on the Christ-Centered Woman's Podcast with your host, Jessica Ham. Hello, and welcome to the Christ-Centered Woman's Podcast. This is the Anchored and Alive series where we focus on mental health. And this is our third and final episode for our series on addiction. In part one, we tried to offer hope to the person that may be struggling with the addiction, trying to challenge the stigma and establish that addiction is a disease. In part two, we focused on the loved one, that person that is trying to take care of the person who is addicted. Now today, we move into the action phase. We are talking about the toughest, most necessary steps, which are intervention, consequences, and what life truly looks like in long-term recovery for the entire family. This is about establishing a new healthy environment where recovery, not addiction, is the centerpiece. Our goal is to move from reacting to the addiction to being proactive and building a life of recovery that is guided by faith and wisdom. Before we get to the intervention part, we have to talk about the roles within the family unit. In a clinical setting, we see that when one person is addicted, the rest of the family instinctively takes on roles to keep the system in balance, even when that balance is toxic. So when working with families, we often see several roles that family members take on. The first is the enabler. This is usually a spouse or a parent who softens the blow of consequences. Then we have the hero, the person who is the overachiever, who tries to make the family look perfect to cover up the shame. Then we have the scapegoat, the one who acts out, drawing attention away from the addict and has their own, quote, bad behavior. We have the lost child, the quiet one who stays under the radar to avoid causing more stress for the family. And then we have the mascot, and in some cases you'll hear it called the clown. And this is the person who uses humor or antics to break the tension. In recovery, it's important that we undo these roles because these roles are not healthy in a family system. In working with addiction and addictive families now for 18 years, I can tell you that undoing these roles can be super tough. When we think about these roles, some things have to change, and they have to happen within the family where the addiction is taking place. The hero needs to learn that it's okay to fail. The enabler needs to step back. The scapegoat needs to be seen for more than their mistakes. The reality is, we aren't just helping the addict get sober. We are helping the family find their true identities, rather than what are usually these survival roles that they've been carrying on. This is a complete change for everybody in the family. And often this is what makes recovery for the entire family so hard. I often see where those who are addicted, they want to get clean and sober, and they relapse when other members of the family try to shift back into those old roles. And again, I've said it over and over, but addiction, it's a tough thing to deal with. It's a tough thing for any family to deal with. And sometimes the chaotic cycle of addiction is so deep that the family has to step in with a formal intervention. Now, I do know that the use of interventions is controversial. Even in my own field, it's controversial. But we also have to be real too, because sometimes families get so sick and tired of living in the chaos that the addicted person, they're refusing to voluntarily get help, and they have to do something more extreme. So when they get to their wits' end, and this is often the last straw before just completely setting very extreme boundaries like kicking the person out of the house or cutting off communication, this is where an intervention comes in. And an intervention, let me be very clear, is a clinically led process. It's not a moment of anger, but it is an opportunity to present a unified front of love and also consequences. Now, the purpose of intervention is not to fix the addict, but to lovingly present them with a choice. a choice between entering in a structured treatment environment now or facing the immediate necessary consequences of their actions. Now, the part of the family, what this requires first, preparation. I want to say again, do not attempt this on your own. You need to work with a certified interventionist or a skilled, licensed addictions counselor. You need to make sure that the person you are using has a professional background in working with addiction, and they need to provide clinical structure and emotional neutrality. There also has to be unity. Every significant family member must be on the same page. They have to be committed to the plan and the consequences for the person who is in the addiction. And then finally, this is where the clinical offer comes in. There always needs to be a clear path to treatment. By this, I mean we have a bed ready for you at this facility. It needs to be very specific. We are ready to go now. With that said, consequences that you as the family members have to sometimes implement, they can be painful, but they're also rooted in a biblical concept, allowing a person to reap what they sow. Galatians 6:7 says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." This is a loving act to step back and let the natural consequences become the motivation for that person to change. In this podcast, I also want to talk a little bit about those financial boundaries, because these are probably some of the more challenging boundaries for loved ones that involve money and the living arrangements. As a clinician, I see financial enabling as one of the hardest chains to break. If you are the spouse or a parent, you must treat your finances as a separate entity. They are God's resource entrusted to you. And when it comes to addiction, it is a financial black hole. Now, when we think about boundaries with finances, it has to be immediate. If the addict is actively using, or if it's not with drugs or alcohol, maybe they have a gambling addiction. Whatever their addiction is, if they are actively using and actively engaging in those behaviors, all joint accounts should be secured. Money should be used only for necessities, such as rent that's paid directly to the landlord, bills paid directly to the company. Do not give them individual money. And the other thing is what I call the no loan rule. Do not lend or give money to the addict. Don't give them money for food, because I hear that all the time. The addict will go to their family members and say, "Oh, but I'm starving. I need money for food or gas." Do not do that. It often is what feeds the addiction. You have to remember that addiction happens because it is built on lies. And if they truly need essentials, buy the essential item yourself. Do not ever give them cash. So if they need toothpaste or if they need food, go buy it for them. Never, ever, ever give them cash. The concept of detaching with love means separating yourself emotionally and practically from the addict's chaotic choices. This is not the same as abandoning them. When you set boundaries and you detach with love, it means you love the person, but you detest the disease of addiction. You do not engage in arguments when they are intoxicated or high. You focus on your own peace, regardless of their current status. This aligns perfectly with the peace that we also talked about in part 2, the peace Christ gives that is independent of the world's chaos. We find this in John 14:27. Detaching allows you to maintain that peace. Whether the addict enters recovery or not, the family has a new normal. If recovery begins, the battle with addiction simply shifts. It does not end. When your loved one finishes residential treatment, you might find yourself having just overwhelming joy. But it's crucial to understand that treatment, it is not a cure. It's the foundation. The most dangerous period that we see clinically is often the first year when people come back home, when they transition from that structured environment of treatment to the reality of daily life. In addiction work, we recognize that this first year is when most relapse happens, because getting back into that daily life with those stresses, it can be difficult because you have to remember familiar coping skills we're using, and they no longer are supposed to be doing those things. When you have somebody who is coming out of treatment, here's what you can expect and how your family can help. The first thing, expect emotional volatility. Your loved one will be experiencing feelings that they haven't learned to manage without using. They might be moody, they might be easily frustrated, or they might even be depressed. And yes, they talk a lot about feelings in treatment. Running many treatment groups, I can attest to this. However, it's just the basics, the foundational skills that they get there. So there's going to be times where they still have overwhelming feelings. As a family, you have to remember to focus on validating the feeling, not fixing their problem. Also remember, it does take time for the trust to be built back, and that's on all sides. The person in addiction, most likely, it always seems to happen, they told lies while they were using or engaging in whatever that addictive behavior was, and they had negative behaviors during their addiction. At the same time, the family may have also done things to enable the addiction. So as family members, you also have to be aware and make a family effort to change. Another thing when a person comes out of treatment is you do have to encourage accountability. Your primary role, it shifts from policing to supporting their accountability. And this means respecting their schedule for 12-step meetings and also encouraging them to use their sponsor or accountability partner. It just depends on the program. Some support groups call it a sponsor. Some people will call it an accountability partner, but definitely I can say make sure whatever their addiction is, they get involved in a 12-step group because this is very important for them to stay sober. And whatever you do, as the family member, do not become their sponsor. Even if you're in recovery yourself, do not become their sponsor, because I have seen this go bad so many times when family members try to be the sponsor for their loved one who's struggling with addiction. It does not work. Also, attend your own family support groups. The family has to continue their own recovery work. Most treatment centers strongly recommend that family members attend Al-Anon or Alateen or CODA meetings for at least the first year. This helps you maintain your boundaries while the addict also is working on their own boundaries. One thing that often comes up too is, what if I live in a rural area and I don't have access to these things? There are plenty of online meetings now that you can access. All you have to do is Google Al-Anon online or Alateen online or CODA meetings online, and you will find a plethora of family support groups there that you can just go and log into your computer. Communicate also. That's a huge piece in recovery. Communicate, don't confront. Have regular, open, calm conversations about how their recovery is going. One thing I will say too is refrain from using the question, did you use today? Because in working with addicts, I can tell you that is the number one thing that infuriates them. A better way to ask and check in on their recovery is, what challenges did you face today? Because ultimately, the thing that you have to remember, as hard as it can be, this is their recovery. This is their choice to stay clean and sober. No matter if you can stand over them 24/7, but you cannot make a person make a change. It has to be something that they do on their own. So as a family member, it's so important to focus on the effort, not just their outcome. Because also remember, as I stated earlier, relapse can be very high. And when someone relapses, this is something that I experience even as a clinician, you want them to feel like they can come to you and ask for help again. Another thing to remember too is recovery, it's not a destination. It is a daily process of spiritual, mental, and physical discipline. For the addict, what does this mean? That means continuous surrender. And I said it before and I will say it again, remaining active in some sort of 12-step program. They cannot do this on their own. Accountability, maintaining close contact with a sponsor or group. Addressing root issues, that means continuing therapy to work through their trauma and other underlying mental health concerns. And with that, I will say most individuals who struggle with addiction, if not all, have some underlying mental health condition and it needs to be addressed. This also means a new culture for the family. So a new normal here involves unwavering consistency with the boundaries. As a family member, you have to maintain the boundaries, or as some people say, hold the line. You're not doing this out of some kind of hatred, but you're doing this out of love for your entire family, and you're also trying to protect the recovery environment for that person who is trying to heal from their addiction. This can be exhausting, which is why you're having your own support system. It is vital. There will be times when setbacks happen, and you have to remember the ultimate source of strength. And we read about this in Isaiah 40, verse 31. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. You have to remember that recovery is a marathon, and the Lord promises to renew your strength. And then finally, I want to talk about the church's role, because I cannot tell you in my clinical work how many times, sadly, that people who are in addiction and even family members of those who are in addiction feel completely isolated by their church family. And that's the saddest thing. If somebody in your congregation is coming home from rehab or coming home from treatment, what I want you to know is they often feel like they are walking into a spiritual minefield of shame. So as a church, how can you help? First thing I want to say is take off that spiritual mask, because it feels very superficial to somebody who is coming home from really in a place of struggling. So don't just say, I'm praying for you, and walk away. Engage with them. Ask, how is your recovery going today? Is there anything I can do to help support you? Normalize that they're having a struggle and you want to be there. Also offer practical support. Perhaps they're a parent and they need childcare so they can go to a 12-step group, or maybe it's a family member who is needing to go to their own family support group. Another thing is sometimes relapse happens, and I've said that before because it's the reality. Most people, I can tell you, take at least 8 attempts of treatment before they start to get sober. And that's, I know, an alarming thing, but having worked in this field, I can tell you it's very true. There are a few who definitely can overcome that statistic, and I hope and pray that, if you're listening to this and you know somebody who's struggling, that's you. But I want to say that relapse does happen, and the church should not be a place that the addict and the family runs from, but the place they run to. We need, as Christians, to be a community that understands that healing and addiction is a process. It is not a light switch. And also, don't treat the addict or their family like they are a project. Treat them like a brother or sister with a specific medical and spiritual need. Maybe they need to feel like they're a part of church. Maybe they need to, take on a role. Maybe they need to be a greeter at the door, whatever that might be. But a lot of times it can really help when they feel like they have a purpose. I know we have covered a lot in these 3 episodes of addiction, but I want you to remember these things. The addict can find freedom from addiction. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. For the loved one, 1 Peter 5, verse 7 says, casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you. Also in John 14:27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. And then finally, for the family, I want to leave this truth in Galatians 6:7. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, he will also reap. So reminding you to keep those loving boundaries and trusting God to handle the consequences. And then finally, the truths for the church. I want to focus on Galatians 6, verses 1 and 2. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. And then finally, I do want to say, if you have taken nothing else away from this 3-part series, If you're struggling with addiction or you have a loved one who is, I want you to know you are not in this battle alone. There is always hope in Jesus Christ. And I hope that this series has given you the courage, if you need it, to seek help, the wisdom to set boundaries, and the faith to walk toward the recovery and healing that God desires for you. Thank you for listening and studying with me today. I hope that you have a blessed rest of your day. And remember, in all that you do, keep Christ-centered.